Well, if that isn't an archive from the past, one of our alternate intros, the first that Harry did, complete with little scratchiness and everything else. It sounds like something from Pathé News. Anyway, this is the Grassy Knoll. You're listening to this either on the Pasco Radio or remnantradio.org website on the streams. You hear it in our archives on Vyzygoth.com. And you can also listen to it locally live on AM 1610 WDCX. We have with us for our fourth round Andrew Colvin. He is the documentary filmmaker of the title, The Mothman's Photographer. And we've talked about a lot of stuff way beyond the Mothman. He's very, very knowledgeable about it. He lived in the area in which a lot of these activities took place, and still take place, and that would be West Virginia and the surrounding Ohio River Valley states. And Andrew, thanks a lot for coming back to the Grassy Knoll. How you doing today?
Doing great.
Did the sun shine today out in the Northwest?
Absolutely not.
So how many days running now?
We're almost 2 months straight.
All right, this is a little minutiae, and we'll get on to things. But do you remember the Bill Cosby old album about Seattle, when he did a shtick about Seattle?
I remember those albums, but I don't remember that one.
What happened was, he goes, one day the sun came out and the people all went, "What have we done wrong?" So there's no doubt about the fact that a lot of moss and mold can grow out there. But I'll tell you right now, and you won't feel sorry for us, but every winter is a drought in Florida. We have a drought every year. And nobody thinks about that. They think it's all lush and tropical, and to a certain extent that's right, especially from May through November. But today, as you're talking about what you're getting out there, Andrew, we are getting hammered. I mean, it is like monsoon season, and nobody can believe it's happening. But at any rate, my modem getting blown out by lightning, and we've survived it, and it looks like things are getting a little quiet now. Now, listen, before we go any further, again, we want to tell people that your website is Andy Colvin, COLVIN.com. They can access that video series that you've done, the DVD series, on your website. But there are some other, I think, resources that you wanted to touch upon, and let's do that at this point.
Okay. Well, in addition to the documentary, we have a soundtrack that came out before that.
Oh.
And we do things backwards. I tend to do things backwards, I've found out.
That's why you're on the Grassy Knoll. Go ahead.
Well, it's interesting because I'm 1/8 Native American, and there's this is something I didn't know about until I started this documentary. But the Native Americans have a whole system of beliefs built around the Thunderbird, which, and I guess I should have said this first. I think the Mothman, the Garuda, and the Thunderbird are all the same creature.
All right, let me stop you right there, and I don't mean to derail you, but I've been meaning to ask you this in the last 3 series, so please just beg my intrusion. You know, I keep thinking, does the Phoenix fit in here somewhere, somehow?
It's very related, that's for sure, and there's a similarity. Yeah, I think it is. It's just a slightly different, but it's similar in the sense that both the Garuda and the Phoenix rise full grown. When the Garuda cracks from its egg, it's fully grown, and the symbolism comes across in the actual Buddhist practices of the Math and Dzogchen traditions. They both still they don't worship the Garuda because it's not a religion; it's more of a practice.
Uh-huh.
But they visualize the Garuda, and they talk about the fact that it's a symbolism. In Buddhism, you have all these symbolisms that are for different people. Depending on your own makeup, certain avenues are better for certain people. And the Garuda it's kind of a fast track. It's for people that are already sort of fully grown. Maybe and some people don't believe in reincarnation, but the Buddhists do. So if you've been reincarnated, you've reached levels of Buddhist thought in prior lives, you sort of come to this point where you're ready to awaken, and then you take fast track into Garuda visualizations. And it's akin to another line that people take is one that involves like meditating in graveyards at night. It's a very scary, hardcore thing, and the Garuda can be the same way. But the payoff, for the fear is that you make rapid progress toward your own personal self-realization. So I wanted to mention that first.
Mm-hmm.
But in the Native American, they have a similar thing, too, with a person who's had a dream of the Thunderbird or actually seen it. They have a society called the Heyoka Society, and this is in several different tribes. And in my own tribe, well, I'm a 16th Blackfoot and a 16th Cherokee. In the Blackfoot, they have a Heyoka Society, and they have it in the Sioux, and they have, you can go to any Northwest tribe, and they all have Thunderbird societies. But the Heyoka has their medicine men who, once you've seen this, it changes you. You have different perception of reality. You know that everything is not the same what it appears, and a lot of times these guys become healers, and they tend to do things backwards. That's one of the things they do. They're jokesters. They come out. They're like sacred clowns. They come out at rituals and clown around.
Well, hold on a second. Okay, now you did this, so let me ask you this.
Yeah.
If we remember Little Big Man, you talk about doing things backwards. Do you remember the contrary in Little Big Man?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly it.
Is that it? Excellent. Okay, let me ask you another thing. Now, I'm thinking you out in the Northwest, but I know you don't hail from there. You hail from the East and from the Ohio Valley. And, of course, the Cherokee is down a far stretch. Where did the Blackfoot part of your lineage come from?
That's interesting. I don't know. We just we interviewed my aunt in there, and she talked about Grandma Lucy and showed me some old pictures, and I was incredible. I was like, "Are you sure she's not Cherokee?" Or
right.
Oh no, she's black. She was adamant that she was Blackfoot.
Okay, and let me ask you this, because I'm not that versed on it, and I don't mean to, of course, go off on a side road, so we don't get back to the case. But a Blackfoot, I'm always thinking that like Plains Indians.
Yeah, well, actually, I just remembered something.
Okay.
I've been reading about the Hopewell. I've got a few books on the Hopewell, and they're the ones that are associated with Ohio. And they didn't build the mounds, but people associate them. The Indians claim that they didn't build any of these mounds. But there was a lot of travel between the Ohio Valley and the Great Lakes. There was a major highway there that went north-south up to the Great Lakes and then over toward where the Blackfoot lived. So I'm imagining that's how it happened.
It's probably known as Interstate 75 or something right now.
These old tracks, they're still there. There's a straight line. They're ley lines in a way.
Sure.
Keel talks about how he thinks they were laid on the energy grid patterns.
Well, if nothing else, common sense tells you that the shortest point between two, the shortest distance between 2 points is what? A ley line, really. But not always, but, I think our interstate system was definitely beaten down by the paths of the Native Americans and the pioneers.
Yeah, a lot of these sightings in West Virginia occurred on the interstate while it was being built. But getting back to my plug there, we did our album first, and also I wanted to mention we're going to be transcribing the movie, the documentary. The 30 Hours is going to be a book, and we're hoping that comes out prior to the Mothman Festival this year. Again, that's in September 17th and 18th in Point Pleasant. But one of the guys was in the band that did the soundtrack. I met him in art school in Cincinnati, and I just wanted to touch on him really quick because it seems like so many different people that I've met and worked with over the years have filled in some piece of information as a puzzle for me to help me understand better what is. And this gets back to there's 4 things I sent you, which I will read. These 4 main points I wanted to talk about.
Sure.
Or clarify. The first one is this idea of Peter Levenda's that there's official manipulation of occult forces going on and belief systems for political benefit. So you have government programs and quasi-public-private programs to study these things to manipulate events. And getting back to my friend, he filled in some of the pieces for me for Ohio of what might be happening in central Ohio that fits into that overall manipulation of mindset, if you will. He's from Central Ohio, and or actually from Cincinnati, and he when I started realizing, he had all these important families. Even my classmates. I went to the art academy, and a lot of private, wealthy kids there, and that was where I found out that George Bush, the Bush family, was from Ohio, because they would come into town and stay with my friend's family, or visit, or go to parties. And actually, they stayed with the Bushes stayed with the Lindner family, which is they own Chiquita, basically. Chiquita used to be United Fruit.
All right, would you pronounce that name once again?
Lindner.
Okay, do we know how to spell that? Lindner?
Yeah, and he's the guy that started Carl's Jr. restaurants, and he has all kinds of different businesses. But
do we have any idea if he was in Skull and Bones?
I don't know if Lindner was in there or not.
We can look that up, because Sutton has all the classes in his book.
He owned Circle K, or I don't know if he still owns it. But
he owned Circle K?
Yeah. Well, at one time he did, and
oh, that's beautiful.
So basically, what you have are these families in Ohio that are in the food business. I mean, they have Procter and Gamble. Like, these people are billionaires, and they live a completely different lifestyle. One of my classmates who owned a margarine, a famous brand of margarine. I don't want to mention the name, but he didn't even go to school, but I'm sure that he got his degree.
Well, that's his best break ever. Don't go to the public school system, and you'll actually make money. But Circle K, I tell you what, Harry, my partner, I'm going to say former partner, we don't co-host anymore, but we look at some of these symbolisms, and we're like, and when you say Circle K, I've always wondered about that, and that one of these cats might be involved in it. It's too good. I've said that, not you, so if we're going to get mail, I'll get the mail.
Okay.
It's okay. But I thank goodness for saying that. All right, so go right ahead after the Lindner.
Well, one more thing about that was one of the other guys that I went to class with. There's two more guys I want to talk about. One was I'm pretty sure his dad must have been in the CIA or something, because just of how they sort of lived and everything. But he went into the art restoration business, and they owned an island in Florida down there. And I started kind of researching that area, sort of on the inside on the Gulf Coast there, around what's the big town there? Anyway, the Sanibel Island and Captiva Island.
All right, you talking about the big city? Oh, seriously? Oh, are we talking about Englewood or Port Charlotte?
Well, I don't want to get specific on exactly where it was, but these guys owned an island down there.
Okay.
And where some famous artists had their studios, I later found out by researching John Judge, his stuff, that this was a CIA enclave, and so you kind of have these art and CIA links going on. That was kind of my point, was that I found out by my experience there that there's there's a book out. I can't remember her name, but it's about the CIA and how they backed a lot of these postmodern painters like Rothko, and he's the guy that threw paint of Pollock.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Now these artists' careers were guided by the CIA, and in some cases they didn't even know. But it was all done behind the scenes, and this lady's written an amazing book. It's well researched. In fact, it's almost dry and boring, but it's very clear that this was going on. And I think Mark David Chapman even was involved in an Atlanta art gallery that was part of this triad. This triad is like this national drug dealing organization that taps into the bluegrass conspiracy.
Well, Alex Constantine had done something also about rock and roll infiltration, and that Lennon might have been hit because of what he was coming out, basically popping off about.
Yeah, but it's one thing I've been wanting to mention, and I keep forgetting it. The triad taps into Florida, and it taps in that area near Venice, on the Gulf Coast there, where the hijackers were training.
Yep.
And and Daniel Hopsticker is,
Mm-hmm.
you're probably familiar with his stuff. He
Sure.
really goes into all that.
Yep.
That's these things link back to the Ohio Valley.
Let me also say this, that I have a very good friend who's a captain for a major airline. And some people have heard this story before, but it's been a long time since I said this, and I think it would be edifying. I hope you think it will be, Andrew. But this was the case. He flew with two individuals at separate times who both regaled him with how they bridged their careers from the military to the commercial with running dope for Iran-Contra. Okay? Now, one of them went down in a drink in the Gulf, and he knew, it was at dusk, he knew the Coast Guard wasn't going to come out because they knew by radar and the profile that this guy was a drug runner. So they didn't go out. They figured let him drown. The heck with it. Unfortunately, the gentleman didn't drown. He was sitting on the top of his plane, what was left of it, and the Coast Guard came out and reluctantly took him back, and they couldn't turn him in because they knew he was part of the program. So when you talk about Florida and its very, very interesting involvement, of course, not mainstream, but under the radar, about running dope and stuff, and people will tell you in this state, and I've seen it myself, I'm sorry, but I mean, there's been drop-offs in broad daylight. They are absolutely bold about what they do. And people on the Gulf Coast will talk about late-night runs, at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning when nobody's supposed to be in the air, and they know exactly what's happening. You catch my drift?
Well, we even had, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I interviewed a guy in the documentary who saw Mothman in 2001, right after 9/11. He saw it in Florida, and he was wanting to know what it was all about, and I was joking at the time, and I said, well, it's probably Mothman wanting to tell us to look in Florida for some more angles on this whole web.
Mm-hmm. And that was up on the northern border near Georgia, was that correct?
Yeah.
All right, and you have to realize something, and I don't know if you know that, and this could be a coincidence, but I'm going to throw it out to you. You understand where Georgie hung out on 9/11 in his brother's state, right? Now, there's things that we've talked about in time gone by, and they may be sucked down the memory hole, but Andrew, I will tell you straight that there were 2 executive orders enforced by Jeb Bush. Are you aware of this? No. Do you know where I'm going with this?
Maybe.
All right. What he did was he activated the National Guard, which is not unusual from time to time. But, of course, there were no hurricanes down here on the horizon. So one of them was activated, I believe, on Friday, the Friday before the Tuesday, okay, which was 9/11. And he activated the second one on 9/11. That second one was activated before New York or Washington or Pennsylvania ever enacted any kind of emergency orders. And so that's kind of interesting that this state would have those two.
Well, his brother was the head of security at the World Trade Center, right? Did we talk about that?
That was Marvin. Was it
Did we
Marvin?
mention that on the air?
I don't think we did, but I mean, probably a lot of listeners know that, but if they don't, let's talk about it now. Yeah, I mean, isn't that amazing?
Well, I don't know. Yeah, it certainly is, and I don't know anything more about it. And Marvin's a very mysterious character, but there were some interesting buildings around the complex that involved other parts of the conspiracy, perhaps, like Bankers Trust was right next to it,
but
and didn't get damaged. Bankers Trust, sort of where the hijackers banked. That was one thing.
Oh, it was selective destruction that day. But what's interesting is that if you ask most Republicans, even name George Bush's brothers, Marvin won't come up.
Right.
And neither will Neil. Just Jed. And of course, Neil was key, obviously, in that Silverado trashing, and also a friend of Scott Hinckley, the brother of John Hinckley, who shot who? Ronnie.
I heard an interesting radio NPR story about a week or two ago about the Deutsche Bank building, which is another one of these buildings right next to it that didn't get damaged. And of course, the Deutsche Bank is the bank that the trading was done with regard to the United Airlines right before the attack.
Yeah, and also in Chicago, the put options, which, while he was still a straight guy, Rupert talked about, and that the spiking in put options went up something like 1,100% on only 2 companies. One of them was United, and the other one was American Airlines.
Yeah, this might be a good place to talk about the crash in West Virginia.
Listen, you know, we've got a million places to go, and it's okay with me. Let's do it.
I'll just mention, and I'll get back on track, but I wanted to, since we're talking about 911, we had reports of a plane crash in near the border of Ohio, Kentucky, and West Virginia on the day of 911. Right. And, of course, this puts it close to Point Pleasant. I'm thinking that probably where it happened is Wayne National Forest. It's simply because that's your biggest area of really, complete wilderness. There's maybe one road through there, and it's an area that's had some strange
goings-on,
creature sightings.
Now we're talking about Flight 77. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Going back to the old idea that these were shot down, and then dummy planes or
drones.
737s. In the case of the World Trade Center, it looks like they were 737s, because that was the type of engine that was found. Were substituted and flown probably remotely.
All right, let me pin you down on this, because this is further interesting, and we'll definitely investigate this, because if you've got something on this, we want to know. And so we've talked about Flight 93 really going down in New Baltimore as a controlled crash site, and that can only happen if it's remote, and that's fine. So if you're saying, well, it was shot down by a jet. Well, no. The jet might have shot the missile into the ground in Shanksville that looked like a crash site but had nothing there. And that there might have been an implosion on a remotely flown jet that went down into Baltimore. Okay, be that as it may, that's another thing to go into.
Yeah, that's possible, yeah.
All right, now what about Wayne Forest? Are we looking at an airliner going down in that area? And let me ask you this, and I'm not being accusatory. What are your sources, as much as you can say, about something happening in that area?
Well, I honestly can't remember exactly where it was, but I believe it was on the Wing TV link to the David McGowan.
McGowan? Okay, no problem.
Series. I think it was in there.
All right, good enough.
So, it's not that verifiable or anything, but it's just kind of theorizing about the planes and.
But Andrew, have you been back? You do hail from there. And have you been back after that time with this knowledge to poke around and ask, did this happen or not? Or
No. That's a very recently came to my knowledge that had been reports of the crash.
All right. Now, you have no people back there who have sent anything to you to confirm or deny that might be the case, right?
Correct. But I will say that in most cases, what they heard was a news report, and in fact I heard a news report. With my own ears that there had been a crash in Colorado that day. So, I think it's possible that the planes that took off that ended up supposedly crashing into things were shot down in various places.
Or swapped out, yeah.
Yeah, or swapped out or something.
Fair enough. That's interesting. That's another thing I have to look into. So thank you very much for bringing that up. And all right, moving on. To things more pertinent to West Virginia and the Mothman. Where do we want to go from here?
Well, I wanted to finish up on what happened in California when we were filming there.
With Harriet?
Yeah, with Harriet.
All right, will you just refresh people's memory as to who Harriet was and why she factors into this?
Well, yeah, Harriet is my childhood friend. We sort of had a Harry Potter thing going. We had Harriet and Tommy and myself. And we were having these things happen, and everyone seemed to pick up certain talents and things, and hers seems to be real psychic abilities and healing abilities. And several times in the filming process, I tested her out on various things and found her to be accurate on several different predictions. And I think we left off, we were talking about Orinda, California, which is a town that has the same name as the Thunderbird's Energy. Mm-hmm. And by the way, we went to Maui and did some filming, and we were looking for some Black Panther sighting witnesses, and they turned out to live on Orinda Road.
Are we talking about Black Panther militants or really Black Panthers?
Oh no, actual Black Panthers running around.
Four-legged animals.
And I'll make a quick link to Union Carbide here. Union Carbide has a black cat as its
it's probably just
mascot.
Probably just a coincidence.
Yeah, probably just a coincidence. But this Orinda name came up 3 times, and when we were in California at that Orinda, we found out about the lady who had studied the paranormal there, who had been involved with the Nine and the Philadelphia scientists who invented the helicopter, the implant, the black box mind control thing device, and that she had been involved in some things like October Surprise and Wandering Bishops. These are these fake churches that are used as CIA fronts.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because not long after we were there was this one-of-a-kind Mothman sighting down north of there. If you go from Orinda and go straight over to Devil's Mountain and then down the other side of it, you bottom out there into the north end of the bay, and that's where a Mothman was seen over these refineries that we had visited when we were there. We had gone to these refineries for some photos. We actually tried to sneak in and get up on top of the hill because some of them are on the hill and then some of them are down in the valley. There was a Mothman sighting there, and it was right over the Concord Naval, right next to the Concord Naval Station, which kind of piqued our interest. We didn't quite know what the significance of it was, but it was the following summer when there was the shoot down of a missile that Harriet and her friends witnessed. It looked like a laser shot it down. That may have been what, assuming that the Mothman trying to clue us into things, that could have been what it was trying to clue us into.
You're talking about the bay. You're talking about San Francisco out on the West Coast, right? Concord and all.
Yeah,
okay.
The San Francisco Bay.
Right.
But another thing that happened was that we had another one-of-a-kind Mothman sighting up in Alaska in 2003. And I emailed Harriet, so I have all this stuff as proof of this. I emailed her and I said, "What's up with the Mothman in Alaska?" She goes, "It's going to be an earthquake." 2 days later, there was an earthquake in that area. Then we had the sniper. We had the DC sniper, which is kind of an interesting story.
No doubt.
You and I talked about the way they were caught.
Mm-hmm.
That they were caught with this what appeared to be a mind control kind of phraseology about the duck and the noose, and then suddenly the next morning these guys are found, in a rest area, which is where you'd never want to go if you were trying to hide out from the cops.
Yeah, but Andrew, when we heard this thing, of course we saw. Well, every morning we watch the Today Show just to get the daily lies before we go to work, and we saw Moose out there in a pre-dawn, interview, and he's going on with this this way out little ditty, and I'm like, okay, what's up with that? And the next thing you know, these guys are caught in some rest area. But it's like, all right, how do you do the jump by finding these guys? I mean, there's a million people in the world along the I-95 everywhere else that pull into rest areas and snooze. You know what I mean? It was like, well, okay, but why did you guys know to go to that particular place? But be that as is, would you agree that there might have been an MK Ultra triggering mechanism in that little Cherokee axiom?
Yeah, well, the story that they use, the duck and the noose, is about Patsy. Is the story of the wrong person being caught, right? So these guys were Patsies, and it's interesting because there's lots of interesting things about it. One of them is the fact that they attended a mosque a block away from my house in Seattle.
They attended a what?
They attended a mosque in Seattle.
A mosque?
A block from my house.
A mosque, M-O-S-Q-U-E?
Yeah, they were Islamic.
Okay.
Now, whether I'm assuming that they were really Muslims, but his past, the older, what was his name?
Oh, you got me on that.
I can't remember his name, but he was, he had this history of going to and from the Caribbean, and it appears that he was ferrying, people in and out, and he had all kinds of identification, and kind of things that spies do.
Yeah, agreed.
And then his whole history at the Monterey, he was at the Monterey Language School, which is usually a spook school.
Hideout, yeah. Was his was his name Williams? Is it Williams? Is that right?
Yeah. He, this mosque didn't last long. It was torn down. not long after. They didn't. It was quickly fenced off. That was one thing. There was an earthquake here, and they used that as an excuse to fence it off, and then eventually it was torn down. But yeah, it appears that those snipings were designed to scare Congress into going into the Iraq War. I mean, it was right at the same time. And as all this stuff was happening, it was pretty obvious what it was. And then there was the counter-terror FBI agent who was killed, one of the killings, Linda Franklin.
Oh, she was popped in the D.C. Suburban area.
Yeah, she was one of the few people who knew all about Al-Qaeda and had, at some point or another wanted to do the right thing, sort of like the O'Neill guy who was made the
scapegoat
security chief 2 weeks before the 9/11 attacks, and he died in the attacks.
Right, he was in the WTC when it went down.
He was critical of the lax approach to Al Qaeda, and he knew all about who was really involved. And this is another little tangent here. When I was in Texas, I was doing construction work I split myself in art school, graduate school, and one of the ladies I worked for was a Saudi princess who had millions of dollars. She bought the house that I was working on by selling one horse, and it was like a $250,000 house. But her father, he flew back and forth from Florida to Texas every day, and he just flew in the air, and he did all of his deals from the airplane. Okay, and I guess there's some laws that you can circumvent this way if you're not actually on the ground.
Okay, if you're extraterrestrial, it's okay.
If you're above the ground and you're flying, then certain laws don't apply. So that was what I was told.
Okay.
That's why he did that. I was like, well, why is he always up there? Well, there's some advantage, there's some business advantage to it. But the kids in the family were getting, millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, like on their birthdays. When they turned 21, they get 20 million. That was, and she was quite open about, what was going on. But anyway, I started to realize that these Saudis that are at the center of this conspiracy was that most of the hijackers were supposedly Saudi. These are wealthy oil people in Texas. And they have houses, they have families, they're there. They're not in Saudi Arabia, they're in Texas. And they're all linked in together, and they all know each other, and it was pretty much of an eye opener for me. But getting back to the sniper, we had the DC sniper, and then we had a sniper in Charleston, West Virginia, not long after that. And it sort of got debunked, and they claimed that there was only a couple of shootings, and then they said it was about drugs or something, and then everybody forgot about it. But it's interesting because one of the shootings happened up near this gravel pit, Campbell's Creek area, where Mothman had been seen. I think for the second time he'd been seen, and we actually used to go there for demolition derbies to watch them, and we almost got killed on the way to one of these by some guys that tried to run us in the river, and they tried to run us in the river at Magic Island, which is what I mentioned before. It's this confluence of the Elk and Kanawha rivers where a lot of strange things have occurred. They had a bridge collapse there that killed a few children. So, looking back at these events, it's a strange tie-in with, we almost died there, and we were going to this gravel pit, which Keel talks about gravel pits and how they often seem to be involved with the Mothman sightings. There was a Mothman sighting at the gravel pit.
But hold on, Andrew. Are you inferring that, or explicitly stating that whatever took place near that gravel pit was that a chance, vagabond type of attack, or do you think it was definitely concerted?
I'm not sure what it is. At this point, I'm just pointing out the connections, and there's some of them. Some of the bigger connections are easier to latch onto and explain, but some of them are just sort of evolving. And
so at this time, you're saying that you don't know that you were singled out per se. It might have been a coincidence, but on the other hand, we don't know at this point. Is that correct?
You mean the car thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, that was just an event, but there's some. I think there's an energy force there that if people, these guys mistook us for somebody else or something and tried to kill us, that I don't think they meant to, but I just think that there's an energy force at some of these places that it can go awry. For instance, at the Mothman Shrine, after Tommy moved, another guy moved in, and his family was involved with the Knights of Pythias, and Pythias had a camp near this gravel pit, and actually the camp was very near this where this Leighton family was that were involved in Jonestown. Okay, so but at this Mothman Shrine, people would sometimes get in fights right in front of it. I mean, I almost saw a guy kill another guy there. It was just out of proportion, I think, to what you'd normally see.
So you think that something's taking people over there?
It affects people.
Okay.
So anyway, these shootings kind of related to this Mothman sighting spot and to where this Leighton family is from. And Harriet and I asked Harriet to predict what she thought would happen next, and she goes, "Well, he's going to stop, and then he's going to start it somewhere else." And I noted that way and have my emails, and sure enough, a few weeks later, it started again in Columbus, which is where she lives. And then, of course, a lot of people know about this is a much more famous, series of shootings, the Columbus sniper. And it turned out that a friend of hers knows the sniper's family, and he was under psychiatric care for years. So I mean, it's hard to tell, if he was just naturally crazy and never was influenced in any way, to go in any direction like shooting people. But you don't know. Once somebody's been in the chair and under medication for a while, especially in a town like Columbus, where you have so many conspiracies.
But Andrew, Columbus doesn't come up on the scale for most of us. When we take a look around, for weird happenings or government clandestine operations. But again, when you mention this, and I was not really cognizant of the Charleston sniper, but you have the D.C. snipers, the Charleston snipers, and the Columbus sniper. And it all still goes around the same area, like there's some kind of nexus in that Ohio River Valley, which...
the anthrax that was used after 9/11 was made in Columbus. It was manufactured there by Battelle Industries and was destroyed within 3 days of the attacks.
What industries? Battelle?
Battelle.
Oh, Battelle, okay.
They have a lab there called the West Jefferson Lab.
Okay.
And someone did an article in Paranoia magazine about all the links from Battelle outward, and it's an amazing graph. If anyone could find that article, you could ask Paranoia, and they could tell you which one it was.
Okay,
an amazing chart of all the links. It involves all of these different corporations, including Carbide and others. Columbus is the place that the JFK conspirators kind of fled to get away from Jim Garrison.
Well, there were stories that the limousine, the car that Kennedy was in, was brought to Columbus. Have you heard that?
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Well, Phelps covers that in Vatican Assassins. I think that car found its way through Columbus, and the person that was in charge of making sure that car was never found in any way, shape, or form was Lee Iacocca.
Wow.
So I don't think I'm talking, out of the side of my neck. I believe Eric did document that in Vatican Assassins, Eric John Phelps. Go ahead.
Well, one more thing I forgot about the DC sniper, the white vans. Remember
the white vans.
Really appeared, and these are probably who was really doing the shooting. It was the team in the white van, right? probably some professional guys.
Well, the government is known to use their vehicle of choice is a white van.
Well, not long after that, I found an article in the New York Times about a data mining company in Georgia. I think it's in Georgia, called Iron Mountain. And of course, that sort of harks back to the old report from Iron Mountain, which has seen its way through so many researchers' files. But their emblem is a triangle, very similar to the Triad Triangle.
What a surprise!
And the article is about white vans, and because they were kind of making a joke play on. This was kind of after the sniper, and so everybody was kind of joking about it. I just looked at the article, I read it, and I thought, that's who it was. That's the company. I mean, and that's, again, I have to qualify that and say I don't know for sure. Sometimes you get an intuition. If you're slightly psychic and have had Mothman experiences. But anyway, there's about 5 other things that we've got. You and I have our little list here. We've got like 4 categories, and there's a couple more things in that first category that I'll just say, and then we can ask me about them.
All right, let me stop you here because we're almost 3/4 of the way through the show. But I want to remind everybody you're listening to the Grassy Knoll. This is Viz. This is AM 1610 WDCX. You'll hear this on Remnant Radio and PascoRadio.org. And this is Andrew Colvin. This is our fourth part of an interview, which may last forever. But in the meantime, you can go to andycolvin.com to acquire his DVD series. But also, Andrew, is there any other resources that you would like people to check in on with regard to what you're talking about that kind of fills in some of the blank spaces or gives a little bit more dimension to what you're talking about?
Oh boy,
I'll take that as a yes.
I could plug my book, The Eye of the Garuda.
Well, that's your time. Go ahead and do it, bro.
There it goes, The Eye of the Garuda. It's a photo book, 250 images, some very condensed text in terms of just trying to be as succinct as possible in that book, and that'll be on Amazon. You can just do a search on Mothman here in about 2 months, and it'll be there. Eye of the Garuda.
Are you touching upon a lot of the stuff that we're talking about right now?
Yes, absolutely.
And the thing is this. I alerted a lot of the people that might carry the show or do carry the show from whatever, and that is take a look at this because we're going much deeper than what people would consider. And you understand this, Andrew? Just some kind of like sighting, some Sasquatch sighting, etc. In other words, there's a lot of stuff going on here, and you open up the possibility that what even was happening with the sightings might have something to do with something other than an organic happening. That it might be a psyop, you don't know, but you left that door open. Also, you have, obviously focused a lot of attention on an area that a lot of people don't think about, but that's always been alluded to, in movies and books and such, is a very, very interesting place, and that is West Virginia, which I'll say is, one of the bastions of the Rockefellers, and also the area around it. There's a lot of curious things happening there. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I won't take it any further. I mean, I stated what I did, but you've gone much further afar than people would necessarily expect. I mean, they're looking for winged, beings, and they might not go any further than that. And what I'm saying is, be that as it may, and that no doubt about it. One way or the other has been manifested. But what you've done is you've taken it beyond that and say what's going on behind it, or in spite of it, or because of it. And I think that's it's a very fair thing. So, do you want to address that at all? Am I wrong in stating that as such?
Oh no, you're correct. But I didn't. Those last few things. I think I'm going to change my mind here because those don't really relate to what we've been talking about. So I want to freewheel it here a little bit.
Go for it.
And get back to the sort of take off from the Layton family again. Their son is in jail for. He's the only person in jail for the Jonestown massacre. Did you know that?
No, I mean, Jim Jones and that whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
And this guy's in prison somewhere.
Yeah, Layton is in prison. He's from Charleston. He's actually from Boomer, which is a suburb. It's up near the Technical College, up near an old Union Carbide facility that's been there forever. It's known for polluting the air as badly as the entire city of New York. Okay, and if you measure the particulates up there, it's equal to New York City, and it's coming from one single Union Carbide plant. They claim they fixed the problem, but I would be skeptical.
Would you spell this guy's last name?
Layton.
Okay.
So his father again was head of the Army Biochemical Warfare Division in the 50s. So you have a family there that if there's any funny experimentation going on, they might decide to go back to their hometown and do some of it. That's kind of my thinking.
Okay.
That it sort of puts a spotlight on. A lot of people think Mothman was a chemical genetic mutation, and here we have people that are in charge of the entire operation living there and being involved in mind control ops like Jonestown. Now, the interesting thing about Layton is his behavior after the shootings was very odd. He was very calm and...
what was his connection to the shootings, though?
Well, at the airport, they killed a congressman, Leo Ryan,
okay,
and some other people, and I...
back in that Jonestown situation?
Yeah,
okay,
that was how it all came out.
Okay, now it's coming back. Okay, I got it.
They killed this congressman, and Layton was there with a gun. I don't think he shot him, but he was kind of the patsy for the whole thing. But he was kind of really calm and so forth afterwards. And they just decided, well, he's the best guy to throw in the clink for this, and that's what happened. But he was the doctor at Jonestown, and he had file cabinets filled with mind control drugs. And one of the people he's claimed to have treated was the guy who later shot the mayor of San Francisco, and Harvey Milk.
Harvey Milk, yeah. Okay.
And so, because they knew a lot about Jonestown. And so then this guy who had been at Jonestown and had some missing time in his resume.
Wait a minute, the shooter was Danny White?
Yeah, Dan White is thought to have been at Jonestown and been programmed by Layton.
Holy
mackerel. That was Mae Brussels' theory, at least.
Yeah, but you got to understand. I mean, you got to admit.
It's the Twinkie defense we're talking about, okay?
What does Twinkie mean?
The Twinkie defense.
Yeah, but what does Twinkie mean? I'm not hip to that.
Well, another little parallel that I just got a book on Union Carbide, the history of Union Carbide, and one of their early directors was Army biochemical head. So we had two biochemical Army heads from either from there or connected to Carbide, which made its base there. The Charleston facility was their main facility. They also had one in Clendenin, which, by the way, was the first Mothman sighting. Okay, so you seem to have this pattern. They also have a facility in Sistersville. Here's a nice, interesting little topic. Sistersville, West Virginia. Now, this is the place where the great airship sightings occurred in 1897. Remember that?
No, I wasn't there for that one.
Well, this is a famous airship sighting thing that occurred mostly in Texas. So there's books have been written about the Texas airship mystery.
But are you talking about UFOs or dirigibles or what?
And now we're back to UFOs, and in some ways, I think UFOs are also ciphers for this process. There could be.
Okay.
It's just interesting that they're all in Texas, but then there's one in Sistersville, one sighting of an airship. It just begs investigation. It's saying, look at this. This is an oddity. Well, Carbide has a facility there.
Union Carbide had a facility in Texas at the late part of the 19th century? Are we talking about 1897?
Well, they didn't have a facility. I don't know. I haven't read the book entirely, so I don't know yet.
Okay, all right.
Some of them came online later in the, like in the 20s or something.
Okay.
Okay. But that year, 1897, was, I just noticed it because I was reading, was the year that they had their first official research reports written up.
Okay.
So it's like a date of interest in the company. They made a point of mentioning it in the book. And we're kind of getting into, ifs and buts on that, but I just thought I'd throw it out as something I came across today.
Well, let me
I come across a lot of these, and some of them I let go of because they're not going anywhere.
Let me ask you this, and this is pretty inflammatory, and just answer it the best way you can, and the way you should. And that is, Union Carbide seems to have a little nefarious presence. What happened in Bhopal, was that clearly an accident, or do you have any information that it might have been, shall we say, a test?
No. All I have is an interesting advertisement from Union Carbide from the 60s, I think it was, early 60s.
What, like a classified?
No, it's a magazine ad that shows their Bhopal plant and a big hand of God. They had this hand of God in all their ads, and it's pouring a test tube of red liquid over the plant. I mean, it's totally what's the word?
Prophetic?
Yeah, prophetic.
You had that graphic?
Yeah.
Can I ask you to send it?
It's been bandied about here and there. Other people, it's in the Bhopal books.
Okay.
A couple of people that have written critical books have found it and put it in their books. But another interesting connection is the Cleveland connection to Union Carbide. One of their big building blocks when they first started was out of Cleveland, the Electrometallurgical Company, which was related to Standard Oil in some fashion. And in fact, they were taking cast-off substances from the Standard Oil processing facility in Cleveland and shipping it down to Charleston and using it for parts for their electrometallurgical operations. So, they're starting to see more links, between Carbide and other, petroleum companies and how it all sort of worked.
Where is Carbide's headquarters at? Is it in fact Charleston?
New York City, the corporate headquarters.
All right. Where's the deal? Where does this stuff really get done?
Well, it's all over the country. They have facilities out in Colorado where they do the uranium mining, and again, here's another odd coincidence. How did I end up in these uranium carbide towns in Colorado? But I was driving through Colorado, doing this series of photographs. It's going to be in the book, The Eye of the Garuda. Okay, there's most of the pictures in there relate to documentary or relate to previous work I've done where these symbologies have come out. So I'm driving through there looking for photos for this series, which was a flying terrorist series. I was dressing up like a flying terrorist and photographing. I would travel with someone and they would photograph me at national monuments. So we're looking for places, and we end up in these uranium mining towns in Colorado, and they're owned by Union Carbide. The town is run by Union Carbide, and I think they've sold those now to. I can't remember which company. Martin Marietta, I think. Yeah.
Oh, gee, what a surprise. Okay, that's cool.
And that's the whole Michael Moore thing, Martin Marietta. They were mining in the middle of the night in the national forest. That was one thing we noticed. They weren't mining during the day. They're mining at night, so they're up to something. Mm-hmm. All kinds of traffic in the national forest there next to the town all night long. Mm-hmm. Just to give you, it was so creepy. It was like a company store from the early 1900s or something. The towns were so depressed, and they had a big radioactive, toxic pool fenced off. Right, it's like a place to evaporate, or I don't know exactly. In Charleston, they have these evaporation pools that will turn all different colors: red, green, blue. They smoke. You don't know what they're releasing. And so they had one of these pools, and the town was called Nucla. So they even named the towns after nuclear, names. Uravan. Some of them would be would go the opposite direction, Naturita, like given an environmental name.
Yep.
But there's just these series of towns that are all run on Union Carbide. And they had the pool the radioactive pool next to the swimming pool. I mean, we're talking about 30 feet apart with a fence, with a little chain link fence between. So there appears to be no regard for, the people.
Human life, yeah.
Living there.
You get it. Well, of course not.
Yeah, really, really sad. But kind of lost where I was heading there.
Well, I'll tell you what. At this point, we're kind of running out of time, also.
Yeah, I branched off there onto a side road.
Yeah, but that's this whole deal. I mean, this is what's so fascinating about the whole thing. I mean, the fact that you don't have it all marshaled the way you want to is no detraction whatsoever. The fact is that this is so labyrinthine that it's fascinating. I mean, we could do this like we might be 60 years old and still doing the show. But like I said, I'm being generous with your time. But I mean, you've hit on something without a doubt, and in a way, I guess this might be the first show where you're starting to evince what you found, and we're really happy to air that. And of course, we hope that not only the DVD but the book you do really finds favor with the population, because people really need to know about this. This is not fooling around stuff. And once again, we're down to about 3 minutes. Your website is andycolvin.com. And if you go to film, you'll find out the DVD series. But you will soon be coming out with a book. Is that right, Andy?
Yes, 2 to 3 months on that Eye of the Garuda, and then we're going to have a book which is built off of the documentary specifically coming up later this year. It's going to be just text only.
Okay.
Transcripts, interviews with all the different witnesses that I talked to, and probably even some transcripts of our interviews that we're doing now. And
Andrew's not heard this before. We did not discuss this, but we talked about it a little bit, and that is this might be a CD collation that we do unto itself, like we did with the Collins brothers. But no, I mean, what you've done, I think, is immense. And the fact that you're doing this, sometimes I don't know how you sleep at night, but I mean, I'm fully supportive that you're doing it. Is there anything you want to give us as far as parting comments as we kind of dwindle down to the last 2 minutes?
One little detail I forgot, just to finish up on the Twinkie guy, the town of Boomer that he's from. I went to a camp there because, again, the guy that took over the Mothman Shrine house, part of that, the Knights of Pythias, is that I found out later on the mind control discussion list that researcher Kathy Caston pinpointed or fingered the Knights of Pythias as a mind control society, and she named, I think, Reading, PA as a town where they did a lot of things, and I guess her father was in it and had maybe tried to program her. I can't remember the details, but here we have a mind control secret society in Boomer with this Layton family and West Virginia Technical College, the Union Carbide plant, melting New York City volumes of pollution, and
Well, let's leave it right there, because now the Pythias, secret organizations, we like that kind of stuff. So let's pick it up when we go do it again for part 5. Thank you very much, Andrew Colvin. The site is andycolvin.com, and we're going to go again. And thanks, Andy, for being with us.
You're welcome. Thank you.